Morning, and I'll do a bit of review first and then a bit more grammar in this first session. But the second session I thought would be useful to talk about the writing. And one of the things that I haven't done in the course, haven't spent a great deal of time on since the first week, is to address the question of writing. I think many of you feel a bit more confident now, and you certainly are reading much better. We haven't done drills and practice and so forth. And writing is something that takes a long time to develop. If you think back to the length of time it took you to learn to write English as well as to read it, it was a considerable length of time. So if you think ahead to that, or when we get into the second session, I want to talk about writing. I have some things that I will write with you, and there are one of the few things I want to talk about, like the meaning, if you break down synagogy. That's something Neil and I have been talking about at others, and I'll give you some of my thoughts on it, see if we can, try to understand what the original meaning of the word was. But I'd like to come back to the grammar, and we've been talking about how predicates, which include verbs, but how in independent sentences the verb generally comes at the beginning of the sentence, and then it's followed by the intransitive subject if it's an intransitive verb, or if it's a transitive verb, it's followed by the transitive subject and by the object. And then the last 2 days we've been looking at what happens when you put sentences inside of sentences, when you make complex sentences, where the subject, the transitive subject, will precede the verb, so that you have subject, like subject, verb, object. And in a dependent order sentence, if you have just an intransitive subject, it'll attach to the verb in a way different than in an independent sentence. But anyway, I think the best way, rather than me to talk about it, is to do a few examples with you this morning. And before I do that, I might mention the pronouns, because the pronouns are extremely important in forming sentences. We talked yesterday about pronouns, how sometimes pronouns replace nouns, because we don't go around, repeating the same noun in sentence after sentence. But if I say, well, I saw my wife yesterday, I don't continue to repeat my wife, my wife. Every sentence I have, I then pronominalize. I will replace my wife with she or her, as the case may be. But there are 3 series of pronouns in the language, and basically they're ordered 1, 2, 3. And the reason for calling them 1, 2, 3, or giving them that order, has to do with how they're positioned relative to the verb. The series 1 pronouns are the ones that mark transitive subjects in dependent clauses. This would be independent, and these are the dependent. This is the basic order. Then the transitive subject pronouns in the independent order come following the verb, but we'll see in the dependent order the same series of pronouns marks the object, or the intransitive subject. And this series 3 pronoun right here, these are the ones like ni, nin, nit, nisim, so forth. They follow the series 2. They're in that order. There are also 2 other series of pronouns which are not really new. They use the same material that we're familiar with in the series 2 and 3. Delia was talking about these with us this morning on the way down, but there's a series of pronouns that are formed on the base lo, lo. And I'll put these down just for right now to get them. I'm going to leave this one out, but to me or for me, you have lo-i, lo-i, and some people were wondering how to spell it. Should you maybe spell it like this? Loi, loi. Well, this implies that it's all vowel, lo-i. Or should you spell it like this? Loi, with just a soft Y. A good way to test it to make sure that it really is a hard Y there is to make a question. You know, was it for me, to me? Lo, yeah, lo, yeah. And there you can hear that hard Y quite clearly. But for him or her, lot, lot or lot. For us, lo, lo. For you guys, losim. And for them, lodit. Lodit. I've deliberately saved this one to last because there's a difference between Eastern and Western here. For, you know, I'm speaking to you. To you, I would say in Western, most people would say lon, lon, long O-N, lon. But in Eastern, many people say loon, demei loon, I told you, loon. There's a regular rule for that sets Eastern and Western Gitksan apart in many words, that where you get long O-N, long O-N will correspond to U-N in Eastern. Similarly, how about if you tell somebody to go in Western Gitksan, do you say yen or yin? Yin, okay? Okay, well, that's, that illustrates a similar thing where in one of the things that sets Gitksanum, makes it separate from Niskayam, is that for the most part when you have long E-N in Niskay, it corresponds to I-N in our way. So they say yen, hagwil yen, you know, go walk slowly. We would say hagwil yin. Another word they would say yen for, you know, that useful silence there. Whereas for us, come in. But notice how the long E-N corresponds to I-N. Similarly, where in our way, Yun for glacier, in the Niskay way, Syon. What we call Siyun, they call Syon. But here is a case where the long O-N for Western Gitksan doesn't change into short U. So most people here...
That lun to us is just like daily water, it's a lun.
Yeah, lun, to dip or to bail. But anyway, these are the low pronouns. And so there's a difference between Western and Eastern here. And then there's also a series of pronouns which in Eastern Gitksan would be formed with us, in Western would be formed with s. And you simply, that series, you use the series 3 pronoun, you know, you can say us, ni, or esnidi, esnidit, esdipnidit, and so forth there. So there's the three basic series of pronouns, then there's these low pronouns, and this series right here. Well, to make the, again, to review the dependent order a bit, the dependent order basically is the way you have to reorder sentences to put them inside of sentences. And if we take a sentence something like, if I've got this right from the other day, I ran away, sui bachni, good independent order sentence, sui bach, intransitive verb with an intransitive subject, so you choose from the series 2. But if we want to form, put it inside a sentence to form what I'll call a willed complement, and actually I'll do this in Western. You'll use win rather than will there. If I want to, put sui bachni, put it together with win, we have to do certain things too. We have to change it from independent to dependent order. This win or will adds to the meaning. It's sort of like when I ran, where I ran, as I ran, even sort of weakly because I ran as a result of my running. Can I simply say, can I just take the sui bachni and just stick it after there and say win sui bachni? No, it's not right. See, I'm using a series 3 pronoun there as though it were independent order, but because it's subordinated, because it goes into the dependent order following win, I have to switch it. I have to switch the intransitive subject, which is the same as a transitive object. I have to switch it to a series 2 pronoun. So win sui bachai, or better win sui bachai, or win sui bai, there, or where you even drop the H. That's an example of going from the independent order to the dependent order. Let's take something like Mary ran away. Sui bach Mary. Mary ran away. Can I simply say when sui bacht Mary? Okay. It's no good because you see I'm treating Mary like it was an absolute independent order absolutive. I'm treating Mary like it's, it's an intransitive subject, which is treated exactly the same way as a transitive object. I need to shift it from this position right here, this series 3 position, into series 2 position, which means that as it moves closer to next to the verb and it's a proper noun, it takes the S connective there. The S connective, win sui bachs Mary. We've come across that S connective already if we take a verb like shoot, gu is when.
It doesn't sound right to me.
This sui bachs Mary?
Yeah, will sui bach Mary.
Okay, well that's
That's not a complete sentence.
no, it's not a complete sentence.
Okay.
Not a complete sentence. And the difference between win and will is just the difference between Western and Eastern.
I know that, but it's just
Yeah.
complete.
But see, this is not a complete sentence, but it's what you do when you take a what's basically a complete sentence and then put it inside of another sentence. If you want to, where in English we'd say, you know, when Mary ran away, or where Mary ran away, or as Mary was running away, you would use the will or the when to form that. Now, those are intransitive verbs. Let's look a bit at the transitive verbs. And I'll take this, we can use this basic, we'll use go and when as our transitive verb and as our transitive object. Transitive verb and transitive object. Now, I shot a deer will be go-ish when. Can I say when go-ish when? When go-ish when? No, again, it just doesn't sound right. The reason why is you see that I'm treating it as though it were a main clause in the independent order with verb, subject, object. But I need, because it really here is subordinated, it's a dependent clause, I need to shift the pronoun to the front of the verb and move the object over closer to the verb, so there won't be any pronoun there. Now, can I simply take this hard Y and put it there and say something like Winnie go when? No, doesn't even, can't even begin to make sense out of it, because the series 3 pronoun for ni, the series 3 pronoun, is quite different. It's ni. New and go when. How does that sound? Where I shot the deer, when I shot the deer, as I shot the deer. New and go when. Quite often this will run together and people say newen, newen, newen go when. And where you change a vowel and run it together, it's just like in English, you know, I can talk slowly and say, I cannot understand you. I can't understand you. Can't understand you. You know, you can speed it up and it changes a little bit.
Winter, noon to us, then noon go when.
To a you there, yeah. Okay, that's what I was saying. Well, that's to the same point that I was making there, that in normal rapid speech, that ni you would change to a u before a w, because you see the w is made win with the lips, so instead of ni win, nuin, nuin. Okay, now you shot a deer. You shot a deer. Can we say Wingu and Schwen? Wingu and Schwen? Again, no. You need to shift from independent order into the dependent order. And in this case, we have IN is the series 2 pronoun, or excuse me, not IN, just N right there. This is the transitive. The series 2 pronoun for you singular is basically me, and perhaps muin. Change it to you there. Muin gu when. That muin, when you say it rapidly, sounds almost, well, almost it's the same as your ears, but you say mu and gook, it's not your ears shot the deer. I mean, it's really me or mu, you, singular, when gook, when. Okay, now and what we're doing basically is I'm going over the pattern that's in that handout from 2 days ago, which has win at the bottom. If we want to say he shot the deer, Guit when, and if we try to say win Guit when, it's again not good because we're using an independent order structure where we should be using a subordinated, a dependent order structure. And in this case, see, we've noticed the ne and the me, or nu and mu, come before the win. What happens if we put the he pronoun? Can we say twinguch when? No, doesn't sound right. The T there goes into a different position. It's wintguch when. Wintguch when. Wintguch when. Okay, now I'll run on through these with you because they're quite interesting. We shot a deer, guim when we shot a deer, but not when guim when. You have to move from the hard M, we series 2 pronoun to a series 1 pronoun, and the series 1 pronoun for we there is dip. Dip when guch when. Dip when guch when.
You could put the other way too.
When dip. Okay. And that's okay, so you could put it the other way too.
If you put a place noun in front of it, it seems that wind to wind, you see? Like if you get a max wind to go in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hazelton is where he shot the deer. Yeah. Good. And, well, it's interesting here then, you see it can be either dip win or, how about win dip? Win dip gook? Okay. So this pronoun then, can occur in either order, so that it has a sub-pattern of its own. If we have you plural, guisim when, we want to put it inside of win to make a win complement out of it, or a will complement for Eastern. We have to switch from the series 2 pronouns into a series 1 set, which, see if there's 2 ways here. Missim winguch when, is that all right? Missim winguch when. And how about mewinsim guch when? Is that all right? Mewinsim guch when. Sound all right? Mewinsim guch when. Oh,
If it's a question, then it's all right.
Okay, so it may be that these 2 can switch. I'm not gonna say, I wouldn't say that for sure now because I can see how people are a bit uneasy. And again,
like I said, if you make it a question, then it's all right.
Oh.
Them and some book words.
de, me, win, sim, guch. That's good. Thanks, Art. That's de, me, win, sim, guch, when. Where did you shoot the deer? Where did you shoot the deer? And here you see the two definitely definitely go in that order. I should mention too, in doing, for a person like myself doing field work who doesn't know the language well or who's just learning it, or even for yourself, sometimes it's best not to ask direct questions. If you focus on, working with somebody who's helping you to teach the language and you give them a whole lot of sentences to translate, or you just continue to go, quite often you get so caught up in it and you may not be sure of yourself, or you may move on to a pattern that gets established while you're talking to each other, but it's not really the way you talk. And I'd have to say that when you're first learning a language or first doing research on a language, yeah, you have to ask questions. But the richest material for learning the language and for seeing what the patterns really are is when you just listen to people. And that's why I always carry the little notebook around. One thing, people remember words when we're driving or when we're out that wouldn't come to them otherwise, but I overhear people, listen to them. Again, this, I might say, raises matters of fieldwork ethics, because in some ways you might say, well, he's spying on us, so forth. Let me assure you, whenever I do that, and I use a sentence that I've overheard, like I told you about a sentence that I heard 10 years ago at Anyao, I always change the names. And by and large, I change the names in my examples. I talk about myself, my wife, my children. Mary is a fairly common name, but if there was anybody in here named Mary who was figuring prominently, I would avoid that, because words mean more than just the way they sound. We have the old saying, sticks and stones. They break my bones, but words can never hurt me, and that's not really true. Words can hurt. So I'm just making some comments about the way we do field work and about using examples. If we carry this on, there's just one more to do right here. If we say, they shot the deer, they shot the deer. Notice that so far, by the way, you have gooey, gooin, gooit, gooimp, gooism, where goof becomes gooey, where the G-U-W is obviously the root. This I right here, I'll tell you, is the transitive marker. But would you say they shot the deer? Would you say gooey deet? Gooey deet when? Gooey deet when? No. With the deet, it's simply like this. Gooch deet when. Now, can we just put gooch deet when following win there and just say win gooch deet when? No. It needs to, you need to do something else in this case. You need to have the T right there, which is the third person. It's the third person. It doesn't tell you whether it's singular or plural by itself. If you don't put anything else in there and you have went gooch when, it means when he shot the deer. But if you want to say when they shot the deer, you have the T here, but you indicate that it's they by keeping the deet there. So in that case, you have both a series 3 pronoun here in front of the verb. You keep a series 2 pronoun, the deet, there, and your object remains here. It's a little bit more complicated, but those of you who speak the language know that. And the rest of the sentence, when gooch deet when. Does anybody have any questions about these dependent order structures? I just this morning I feel like you're getting a bit more familiar with the way I'm talking about them. But basically, there's two ways of relating the noun phrases, subject and objects, to verbs. There's the independent order that you use in normal freestanding simple sentences. Then there is the dependent order which you use when you put a sentence inside of another sentence, or when you use certain what I'll call subordinating particles, like hla. Like I wouldn't say hlagu is when, but I'd have to say hlan guch when, something like that, or hla nguch when. I just shot a deer, perhaps might be a translation there. Or this fax right here, which means for the first time, as in naqax di ga'ash. In that case, you see, I wouldn't say fax di ga'ash, so forth and so on, but fax, there's just something about it that makes you have to shift. You have to shift from independent order into dependent order. Okay, well, yesterday, the new material we got onto was involved what I called focused sentences. Focused sentences. And we were looking first at what happens when you focus a sentence that has an intransitive subject. An intransitive subject, so if you have something like Bach or Sui Bach Mark ran away, then to focus that, I said to focus, in focusing you can take any major constituent of the sentence, the subject or object, move it to the front of the sentence, and then you have to do something after. So we have Mark ran away. But if we want to say Mark is the one who ran away, or it's Mark who ran away, like if you ask me, who ran away? Who ran away? In English, I just say Mark ran away. But as I was telling you in Somalgach, you have to answer a question which is always focused with a focused answer. So I would reply to the question, not Sui Bahat, who ran away? I would say Mark Sui Bahat. Sui Bahat. We had several examples. I won't go over those, but that's what happens. And this then is what is called a relative clause. And more specifically, it's a relative clause that signifies the intransitive subject. It means really the one who ran away. The one who ran away. And we had examples of those as in Godem Lutat Timaha, Lutat, the one who lives in heaven or who sits in heaven. We had it also in Limit or Limchit, Tuts Limchit, the birds that sing. Phyllis.
What is the closest example could you give us it's really learned
From English? Okay, in English, relative clauses are generally formed if it's a person with who, who is in heaven. If it's non-human, we use not what, but that. You know, the birds that sing, the birds that sing, not the birds who sing, you know. And in fact, we can often use that with humans. You can say, I saw the man that lives next door. I saw the man that lives next door is, you know, it's good, informal, non-standard English, although you would tend, if you were writing it an essay, probably the teacher would say, correct that to, I saw the man who lives next door there. But the English relative clauses are formed with who and that, which is another way. I ate the bread, which was moldy. But the thing about relative clauses in Spaghet is that they don't use words like who, that, and which. There's ways of expressing those, but that's built into this right here, as in sui bahat. Or, I'll give you another example. The person at a Lehrliget, the to miss it. If you look at that, to miss is writer. It's the verb stem to write. The it right here forms a relative clause, so you can understand that as the person who writes or the secretary. I don't know, there might be other ways of translating it, but it's exactly the same kind of structure as sui bahat. It's an intransitive verb that's been changed into a relative clause. Moving on, we were looking next at transitive objects. What happens when you get a transitive object and you want to make a relative clause? So we'll stick with our sentence that we were using here before. GUI when, which consists of a verb, and then there's a transitive marker there, so gu becomes gu, and this transitive subject is right here. It's a series 2 pronoun, and we have our connective, so, because when is a common noun, and here we have our transitive object. We want to focus it. Somebody asked me, Gushguin, what did you shoot? I wouldn't answer back, gu is when. It wouldn't sound quite right. That's an English way of doing it. But I'd answer with a focused sentence, so I take the word that's being focused on. You know, they asked gu, or gushguin, you know, what did you shoot? So it was a deer that I shot. I move that to the front of the sentence then, and my verb then is here, but I need to add a connective because this is a common noun, it's not a proper noun. Wench gooey is a good reply to the sentence gush gooin. What did you shoot? Wench gooey. So it's literally, it was a deer, and the gooey right here doesn't mean I shot it, but it means that I shot, or which I shot, and so forth. This too is a relative clause in this particular sentence right here. Okay, now let's look at another kind of relative clause, but we're not looking at relative clauses just to see what relative clauses look like. We're looking at them because they figure in this general phenomenon, this general matter of focusing in sentences. Let me switch now to a bit more complicated sentence which will make the point a bit clearer, but if we, Bruce shot a deer. Gouis, Bruce, when? Well, okay, I better check. It's still early in the morning. Don't want to make any mistakes now. Bruce shot the deer. Somebody asks me, na and gut when? Na and gut when? Who is it that shot, or who is the one that shot the deer? So I want to say Bruce is the one who shot the deer, or it's Bruce that shot the deer, or it's Bruce who shot the deer. See, there's different ways of saying it in English. There's only one good way in Smalka there. So I put Bruce at the very beginning, and we're forming a relative clause on a transitive subject. We have to, and I'll do it in Western, we have to introduce this particle, n, which is un in Western. Remember, this is the particle. There's another word which sounds exactly the same. It has a different meaning, which is a transitive verb, and I'll leave that at that. Okay. Now, we have to say, you know, what it was. Right here. Bruce and when? Does that sound okay? Sounds okay, but it's better, I've noticed since I've been here, that most of you here in the West would say Bruce and when. And when. Where you, this en, the n or un, is something like English who or that. Yeah. Yes, Julie.
You put it in that structure because the action is complete. The action is finished. Killing is done.
Mm-hmm. It's complete. Yes, and I don't, off the top of my head, if I wanted to say Bruce is the one who was killing the deer with a uke type construction, you can form that. I just don't know how to do it right now. Something like en yugut. But yes, you would understand this as, you know, past. It's something that's happened, something that's completed.
Tense or time.
Pardon?
It's consistent with the kind of time frame.
Yeah, yeah. But notice, couldn't you say Bruce dim and when? Bruce, yeah, Bruce is the one who will kill a deer then.
But if you're actually doing it right now, I think what she's saying, Bruce. Oh, what are you saying? Yeah. Bruce, you, and that's go away.
Yeah, yeah. Right, okay. We're getting into slightly different sorts of structures there, and we'll ignore those. We'll ignore those right now. But with these relative clauses, notice you can use a proper name like there, Bruce and when. Or you can use a series 3 pronoun. Nee and when. I'm the one.
Well, that's Nina's.
Okay.
No, I'm letting them go.
Gouis, though, doesn't that mean something like, you know, I might not be accomplishing what I'm setting out to do. I might be shooting and...
Bruce shot.
So everybody agrees that you're the one that saw it. Bruce goes.
If you
So
just shot
everybody
a
says, yeah,
deer,
it's Bruce that saw it.
You do.
Bruce.
Yeah. Guas.
Bruce.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you this maybe will sharpen your curiosity. This is what's called the antipassive. When you learn transitive verbs,
Oh, yeah.
most transitive verbs will, not all, but most will, if you have gu, then you have guas. If you have goop, gubas. Although the meaning of the us form is often a little bit specialized. If you have gu, as in, you know, goose, get it, Halden goose? Well, guas, which, you know, like a container, but, you know, diapers, you use that there. Yets, to hit, yadzas, you know, what gets hit. Zak, zagwas, what gets hit or killed there. So the transitive verbs, the ASXW ending tells you, you know, what gets done, and with intransitive verbs like bach, bahas, that tells you, you know, what, you know, did the baching and so forth. But notice then you can use any series 3 pronoun here, ni, nisim, nidi, and so forth. Phyllis.
What's the significance of a marker when you're shifting, or is there something to the clause? Or when you shift it to a focus sentence?
Okay, well, in order to build, see, what we're looking at here is how do you build a relative clause? And you build a relative clause differently, whether you're building an intransitive subject, it's one way. If you're building a relative clause on a transitive object, it's another way. And if we're building on a transitive subject like we're doing here, it's this third way. And the marker for the transitive subject relative is en or an. The marker for an intransitive subject is basically vowel t. And the marker for a transitive object, it doesn't have any marker. You just take the object, put it to the front of the sentence, and what's left behind, like, you know, smach gooey. The gooey there, just by itself, is the relative clause. So, see, the relative clauses have different markers then. Intransitive subject marker, transitive object has no marker, transitive subject has this an or un marker. Okay, now there are other kinds of sentences. There are other constituents that can be focused. It's not just the subjects and objects that can be focused, but within sentences you can have what I'll call indirect objects or datives. There can also be time phrases, and there can be manner phrases, you know, like the manner in which an action was performed, so forth. And let me give a basic sentence right here. See if I'm right. Gitnamas Tom Stala es Bruce. Gitnamas Tom Stala es Bruce. Tom gave Bruce some money. Where we have our verb, transitive verb right here. We have our transitive subject there. We have our transitive object here, and then we have, I'll call it an indirect object, but you can also call it a dative, if you will. You know, it's Bruce who got the money. We can form various relative clauses. I could say, Tom entgenommen Dala as Bruce. Tom was the one who gave Bruce the money. I could say, Dala genommen Tom as Bruce. It was money that Tom gave to Bruce. But what if I want to, if somebody asks me, you know, who did Tom give the money to? Who did Tom give the money to? I would answer back a sentence that's something like, Bruce is the one that Tom gave the money to. Or Bruce is the one to whom Tom gave the money. Alice, do you have a question? Okay. But remember, when you focus, whatever constituent in the sentence, you put it at the front. It's new information, it's fronted, it's focused information. Now here's a case where we will use a went clause. So I hope I've got this right. I think I do. Where the when right here doesn't mean when or where, but it actually means sort of like to whom. How is this then? Bruce went genoms Tom's Dala. All right. Bruce is the one Tom gave money to. Or Bruce is the one to whom Tom gave money. See, several different English translations there. Several different English translations. I'll do one more. I'll focus another one for you. Möchte es mag dem will have we. Möchte es mag dem will have we. Möchte told, or I told Möchte, I told to Mark. Then what did I tell Mark? Well, I would have actually said something like dem hau nie, but I wouldn't say möchte es Mark dem hau nie. I wouldn't use an independent order phrase there. I need to use a when. Sorry, apologies to. I was mixing. Möchte es Mark dem when hau we. I have to use a when, you know, a subordinated structure. But what if somebody asked me, you know, who is the one you told you were going home? Okay, well we got to put Mark here because we're going to focus. We're going to focus. And again, we've got to use a when clause, but we're going to have two when clauses here. Mark, oh, even big, it should be möchte. Mark neuen möchte dem when hawe. Mark neuen möchte dem when hawe. Mark is the one I told that I was going home. That's where I've focused a dative. let's try another sentence where I'll focus on what I'll call a manner phrase. Is this, can I say this? If I wanted to say, you know, this is the way I shot it, could I say, gooey will I tune? Is that all right? No good? Okay. Huh? Okay. Okay, now this is a focus sentence then. Tun niwala guht. Notice we have the this. Instead of having win or will there, we have willa. Willa is it's a subordinator that means, you know, in a particular manner. If you ask somebody, how are you doing? How are you doing? What? Da will I win? Da will I willen? You know, different ways there. But da will I, you know, in what manner?
You use noon, mark noon method without it.
Okay, so that we can change the vowel there to U before the W, and if it were Eastern, it would be like Mark Newell Matish.
Not new win, but noon method.
Yeah. Where the whole thing then becomes, the IWI becomes long U, Mark Noon Matish. Yeah. Mark Noon Matish. Yeah. I suspect that's true for both Eastern and Western there. Okay, now here is a case where you have, you know, this is the way I shot it. The niwala guht. The niwala guht is a dependent structure, but if you translate it into English, you know, the best translation is the way that I shot it. Tun niwala guht. This is the way that I shot it. But is there a way of saying this that's not focused, where tune is not at the beginning? I mean, can you say something like, gooey, willy tune, or tune willa willy? Tune willa willy would be, that's the way, this is the way I did it. Yeah. Okay, well this then is a focused sentence, and what we're hanging up on is that I can't give you the basic sentence there. But we're running out of time, but I want to do just one more sentence to show you how you can focus on different constituents there. Let's take a sentence like this, a big long one, which means something like, I'll run you up to Kispiox tomorrow if the weather is good. Or we'll run you up to Kispiox tomorrow. And I want to finish on this. This is a basic sentence, translated into English something like, we'll run you up, you know, we'll take you up in the car. We'll take you up to Kispiox tomorrow if the weather is good. The dim tells us that it's future tense. Alle de Bach means, you know, we'll run you upstream. Alle de Bach, alle upstream. Bach is to go fast, but the dibach means, you know, we're going to take you or run you. The hard M right here is the we part. The nin is the one that's going to get done. The kash or koos kispayox is, you know, two kispayox. Shak, which is the longer way of saying tomorrow. You could just say tishak if you say it fast, and then za'am shlacha, if the weather is good. So we have our verb here, we have our transitive subject here, our transitive object here. We have, I'll call it our goal right there. We have a time adverb right here, or a time, it's what we call, I forget what we call this, a modifier or a, one of those ambient predicates, I'm not sure. But anyway, we'll call it a time phrase. And then here we have a circumstantial phrase. You know, we'll do it if the weather is good. Quite long, complex sentence.
I was showing the class last Christmas that I don't want to ever hear him do it. This is a lazy man's sentence, a fair weather man's. There's lots of ifs, but tomorrow never comes.
I see what you mean. I'm not going to try to write these on the board, but just follow me. If we want to say, it's up to Kispiox that we'll take you tomorrow if the weather is good. I mean, I know these are sort of unnatural sentences, but they illustrate how the language works. I could say, Go'osh Kispiox dim dip will kali debahan ta shak zam shlacha. Go'osh Kispiox dim dip kali debahan, so forth and so on, where I take ko'os gispayox and put it at the beginning of the sentence and focus it. If I want to say, if somebody asks me, you know, well, when will you take me up to Kispiox? And I answer back, I could say, shlak dim dip kali debahan ko'os gispayox za'am shlacha. And if somebody says, well, will you take me up to Kispiox tomorrow? Will you take me up to Kispiox tomorrow? I might focus on this circumstance then and shift it, and I might say, well, za'am shlacha dim kali debaham nin or Kispiox dashak. Now, we've run out of time in this first session, but essentially what I wanted to show you here, I'll answer in just a minute, Lillian, is that these focus constructions are extremely important in the language. The focus constructions give the language lots of expressive power. And if you just went around speaking in independent order, simple sentences, it's not that you would, it's not that it would be baby talk, but that your talk doesn't have the rich textual structure, the rich conversational structure or paragraph structure that that we hear, you know, people in fact use. Lillian.
In trying to preserve the sound system of the Gitksan language, would you translate names that have sounds not in Gitksan, such as Mary to Manny, or?
Okay, that's an interesting question, because many names, for example, Mary, in fact, you know, people would just say Melly or Blues and so forth. It's up to you. The Niska, for example, in their phrase dictionary, wherever they used English names, they always left them in the English spelling, because they thought if they put them into Somalic spelling, that outsiders might get the wrong idea, might get the idea that they really can't pronounce them in the proper English way. But I'd say it's up to you, and that's the sort of considerations you want to take into account. But yes, you know, many of these English names have their own distinctive Gitksan pronunciation.
But that was in the olden days when they couldn't pronounce those.
Well, it was in the days, yeah. And another way of saying it's not simply it was in the old days, it was when most Gitksan people were second language speakers of English, whereas most of you now are first language speakers. And by the way, you can be a first language speaker of more than one language. And that's what we've been talking about. If you want to aim, we want the children to be first language speakers of Somaliga and English. Something I've been trying to understand for years, and I know that it's that many of you have been trying to understand it too. As you know, one of the most important social roles, to use sociological terminology here, one of the most important social roles in Gitksan society is the role of the chief. And I'll speak of male chiefs right here. But the people who in the singular are referred to as Simagit. Simagit. And the plural of Simagit is a bit different. And I'll stay in Western Gitksan here, but Simgigyat. Simagit, Simgigyat. It's pretty easy to see that the sim part here is the same word that elsewhere means real or true, like simran, simtili, simen, you know, what you say is true, and so forth. Sim. In simgigyat, you know, gyat we know as the word for people, and the gi is a plural right here, so it really, the literal translation of chief, simgigyat, would be the real people or the true people there. But when we look at Simagit, you know, it's what is Agit? What's the Agit part of it? And it's something that's always exercised my mind. Now here I want to show you how a linguist or an anthropologist goes about trying to puzzle this out, but yet it's dependent not just on my brain power, but also on talking with you and with other people who know the language well. But there are a small number of other words that end in git that are of some interest here. There is the word for feast, which again, you know, trying to break down what its original or its linguistic meaning might be is an interesting question, but Lietligit. And there is the word Sagit, which means to murder or murderer. Sagit. What all three of these words, Simagit and Lietligit, and Sagit have in common is the git. And I think that the git part there is just a reduced form of gyat. Gyat, it's people. So the question then is, you know, this is true or real, and this means people. What does this root part, the all, mean there? And to begin to get at that, you need to look at some other words. And another word that I think is perhaps related that has the same root in it is the word that means fortress. Like, would somebody tell me the word for fortress around here? Once more? Okay, da'otzip. Or does anybody have it with a hard T? Ta. If I'm hearing Alice correctly there, it's da'otzip. Okay? Some people have heard it with ta. Da'otzip. Da'otzip. And this zip right here, I think, is, you know, if you pronounce it as an independent word in Western, would be tsap, or tep, you know, people. And this duh right here is in da'otzip, it's a verb, it's a prefix that we see in words like, you know, you can bach or you can dibahai, or, gee, I can't think, there's lots of verbs that have either di or da. You get da before a glottal stop or a vowel or an H. You get di before other consonants, but it's a prefix that makes a transitive. It's one way of making a transitive verb. So that this word for fortress is a description. It's something that does something for or to up, to people. There. Okay, now, so that we're trying to figure out what this O is right here. Well, another word that I think may have the that in it is the word for eyelid, where we can say his or her eyelid, lach-alt, where the lach, excuse me, that line should go there, the lach is, you know, means like on or on the surface. The T means his or her. And the hard L there is a suffix that we see in lots of words. It doesn't have a consistent meaning all of its own, but it's a way, you put it at the end of a root and it'll give you a new word, to derive a new word.
How do you spell habal, to look after? Habal.
Habal, where you have that hard L or mauled, to what's to be wrinkled?
No, what I'm talking, habal, to look after, to tend to.
Okay, habal, where you have a different root there. But that's possible. Let me think about that a bit more. But lach'alt, where you have this hard L. I mean, I'll give you another example of that hard L. We were talking about Sealy Lake the other day, and its name is Tachs, hard T. We koppel, Tachs, we koppel. Tach, lake, and then it's this S right here is the connective. It means lake of a person named Uikapel. You need to have the XW here to make it possessed, and then Ui means great or large. Apel is what, sty? Yeah, could be sty on the eye. But the root, op, means, you know, fish heart, or also can be a small boy's, a small boy's penis. There, op. But opal has the general meaning of sty on the eye. But you see, the root there is op, or op, and then we have the hard L, in this case, hard I-L. It's the same hard L right there. You can't pin any particular meaning on the L there. This is just a bit of a digression. But anyway, we have this word here, eyelid, where, you know, this lach means, you know, on the surface, this is the possessor, the his or her. this suffix right here doesn't have any meaning, but we have our basic root here, all. And what would seem to be the case, I think, is, it's like cover, not habach, not a lid, but a cover. And we also have words then like, a pillowcase. It's pillowcase or it's cover, audit, or this stuff right here makes it definite. This is the its cover, and the D right here is a transitivizer. It makes it transitive, so audit describes, it covers it, describes something. Delia, I think it was Delia or Vera the other day, in the car coming down, there is a verb which is sa'odi, and if you tell somebody sa'odish, you tell somebody that, like put a gun in the case, not cover it up, but put it into the cover where it has a cover around it. There. But again, we have this prefix sa, so forth, which is usually si if it's before a consonant, a regular consonant, but before a glottal stop or an H, it's sa. The transitive marker, and this is the imperative, you. So audit, cover it up. What I want to suggest to you here is that this, and there's one more word. I can't find it. I don't have my slip file with me here, so I can't look at it. But somewhere in my notes, I have an old word where the root part of it is oda, where you have o plus a da suffix, and it's not the word for breechcloth or diaper or something like that, but it means something that covers or protects.
Is that referring to a child, or?
Tell me.
It's sort of a wrapping.
Okay, so is
like
it
a blanket, yeah.
swaddling?
Yeah.
Just by itself then, order? Good.
There's another word that I was thinking of. Is that audit?
How?
Audit. That means like protection, being protected.
Uh-huh.
Audit for fern. That means they're protecting fern.
Okay, say that once more, Alice.
Audit.
Audit. Kina. Yeah. Okay, well that looks like, not deet, but dit.
Well, anyway.
Either way. Okay, so protect. Well, it looks like much the same thing except for the glottal stop right here, but that glottal stop actually could be...
Well, you could just say oh.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, but you're on to exactly what I've been thinking right here, is that this must be an old root that survives today in these words where, the meaning of, something that protects or covers is clear. So that then the original or the old linguistic meaning, auget, would be the man who covers, who protects the people. Yeah, who protects the people. In the same way that da'od is the thing that protects the people.
That's what I was saying, right? That what it says is a ball that hit. Good old Western, a ball, take care. cover, protect the ball, some ball that the kids
Thank you. All right, that's got it. Okay. This also is a very good illustration of what I was talking about the other day. Now, I want to make this point again and make it stronger. The other day, we spent 3 days looking at the history of study of the language. And I talked about the unbroken indigenous native tradition of language study and then the anthropologists and linguists and so forth. What we've just seen right now is coming together of those streams that Art, for example, and Alice have, through their knowledge of the language and standing back a bit from it a little bit, going after the meaning, and Art actually, coming out and giving a good definition of the meaning of chief there, arriving at much the same or the same conclusions that I did by using, the linguistic material, or from using, I'll call it an academic linguistic perspective, but that the two are not separate. They come together, and the strongest will be when they truly come together, and, we get some of you people with higher degrees in linguistics or anthropology. But I'd have to say before that, I hope there are more lawyers and doctors and so forth. Even though I have a lot of feeling and respect for my own discipline, I think in terms of priorities, you have other priorities rather than your own anthropologists and linguists. Not really linguists. I mean, in the case of this language work here, that is a high priority, what I meant in terms of this sort of thing. Okay, well, does that seem to make sense for Somali?
Excuse me, Bruce. You got lach older, the eyelid, and lach older. You got LAX and HLA. Lach.
Well, here the lach is lach-u, or lach-skatnist. It means the lach there means, on something. So that, this eyelid right here, it's a description, it's the surface on the eyelid, and it tells what that lid does. It protects, it awes the eye. If I've got it, if we've got it right together. Yeah. Cooperative. Yeah. I'd like to just open the floor up. To open the floor now, I don't have any more material prepared, but I'd be very glad to answer any questions or people may.
good into it. You think that Lahore is above the eye protecting.
Same for the chief is above the people, head of the people, above the eye, above the people.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
From different points of view.
Yeah, but it's in there. I mean, you can see it in those words.
So it's cleverly put together.
And then Lilligit.
Lilligit, I think, I don't know of any stem lately. I can't break that down, but quite often, if you reduplicate a stem, if there's an old stem or an old root then to make a plural of it would be li, or it would be litli. You could have the stress shift back. So Lilligit is obviously, it's an old Semitic word, but exactly what the meaning of that is, I don't know.
Just calling the people together.
Calling. Okay, calling the people together and Saget, the Sag, is that?
Yeah, we got a, not called Cook
Okay, well, anybody, the writing is what I thought might be useful to talk about, not simply to write words, although I'll be glad to do that if there's any words you want, but to talk more generally. See, as it's turned out in this course, because of the short period of time, just 4 weeks I had here, the best use of time seemed to be to put as much material into my lectures or lessons to go onto the videotape, and then there'll be a written transcript that goes with it, and you can study that later. To do that rather than, let's say, to come in and drill you every morning, or to try to, to teach you writing and check it. And I'd have to say honestly that that's not something I know a great deal about. There, I'm sure amongst you, some of you who are trained as teachers and with long experience in teaching, that you know more about pedagogy and actually doing it than I do. On the other hand, it may be that as a linguist I could say something about what needs to go into the pedagogy. But I know that writing gives you lots of concern.
The question you have is the plural. I don't know, Granny used to say one word and you ask us what it means more than one. It's just like what you're doing. Like this morning we had lunch.
Yeah.
What's a plural of that? Or how do you say when there's more? Yeah. And we didn't know that for a long time. They said logic.
How?
Logic.
Gee whiz.
Lund acts logic.
Logics. Is that right? Lund singular, logics. Barb asked me a question which I'll repeat for everybody, asking my opinion or my thoughts on the matter of composition. That, when we write English and you go into class, part of learning English is not just learning the grammar and spelling, but you learn different written forms, or what are called genres, to use the fancy term. But you learn how to write a letter, how you write a book report, how you write an essay, how you write a term paper, and so forth. And, in writing, these genres don't exist, and the language needs to be extended and developed to do it. But when we look at, the oral culture of the Gitksan people and so forth, there are a number of oral genres, such as singing, within families, the adawak, or adawak, and the antimatash, and people differ in their ability to narrate stories. Some people are better narrators than others. Can not only get the full thing, but when they tell it, it really is just chock-a-block full and rich with detail. The other area for creative expression was the making up of songs. Now, I don't know too much about it over here, but when I was working in the late 60s on the over at Gitksan, I was told about people who were, well, you'd really have to call them, what's the term in English? Not dramatologist or dramaturg, pardon? Musicology. That would be the musicology would be the study of music, but composers, but not just composing the actual music, but it's lyricist, I guess, to make up the lyrics that go with music. So that in the old days, when a chief, when a wilk would, be preparing to put up a pole to have a big feast with yuk in order to, transact house business, and, they have the public come and witness and so forth, that part of that was to have a suitable dramatic performance. Now, the Andamnak do dramatic performances too, but it's often humorous in that case. But the chief would also, of a house, essentially would commission craftsmen, to make the plastic arts and the masks that went along with the performance. But there also were specialists who were lyricists and composers. Now, sometimes the songs are old songs, but these guys also would make up new songs with new lyrics that were appropriate to the occasion and that would make reference to the ayuks and events in the adawah of the host house and so forth. And there's, I haven't seen any of that sort of material. I've just been told about. And what I'm getting at is there is such a tradition. I know that for other cultures, say for example in the Balkans, what used to be Yugoslavia, Serbia, Croatia, Bulgaria, there are traditions of oral poetry. Or similarly, Homer in Greek poetry, that was transmitted orally and not in written form. So I'm sure that in the old days here, there was a similar body of what you could call oral poetry, oral literature, balladry, and it included music and so forth. There was another question. Yeah, Matilda.
Can you spell Gutsagen?
How?
Gutsagen.
Gutsagen. Gutsagen. I'll have a go at it.
There's 2 or 3 different ways I've seen people write it, but I want to know the proper way.
I'll have a go. The last part of it, the Tsagen, is it Tsagen or Tsagen? Okay, long A, back G-A-N, Tsagen. Now the first part, is this a name, by the way? Okay. Okay, now is it just Gutsagen or is it Gutsagen? Is it short or long U there?
But it's said, like I said, most of our names and songs are consonant.
Okay. So it's, this gu is the singular of Cuba.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So Gutsagen. What does tak mean? Does it have anything? Oh, so it's the timsanum, the way they drag things out.
It kind of describes the ego.
Yeah, Gutsagen.
Skin.
Right. It's not really little, but you just say that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But timsanum. Matilda, in timsanum. In your own way, it would be just Gutsagen. But notice you drag it out, Gutsagen, where it's tsa rather than tsa. Gutsagen.
Is Mitch M-I-T-X-W?
What's the meaning?
It's my name, Mitch.
Okay. Lach. Okay. Now, there's 2 words that are very close in sound, but yet are different. The word to be full, mit. But if you make that hard, you get a completely different word. Mit. To scatter like dust or so forth. Mit. So your name, and if it's a name, you could either, write it all together as one word, L-A-B-A-C-X-M-I-T-X-W, or you might want to write it as 2 words, or, put a capital M there, but it's soft M, Lachmid. But I'd like to come back to this matter of writing, I was thinking about it yesterday. I've been thinking about it over the last few days. I don't think writing is something where, you know, you need the teacher to come in and say, look, you spell it this way and spell it that way. But really, the teacher, I think, probably wants to get the principles across, but you need drill and practice. And maybe things like the hard sounds and the soft sounds, I know people still have trouble with those, so that you make your lessons up where you take words that are very similar to each other, maybe where, you know, one word has a soft sound, the other has a hard sound. So tuck, tuck for nose, tuck for nose, and then you compare that with tuck, tuck, which means clam. Clam. And then words that are very similar in sound, tek, as in lutzak, lek, lutzak, lek, tek, and for dish, tek, tek. Where you see, where you take words that are similar and, you know, practice on them, but, you know, look at other words that end, and you have tek, tek. In other words, what's coming to me now is, you know how in English you want to take words that rhyme with each other.
We tried that
Uh-huh.
a couple of days before you came. One we made up.
Yeah. So that's good, because I think the rhymes where words are similar, like say tek and tlek, you know, to go out and to be crooked, they rhyme. They start differently, but the ek part at the end. But there's also, I mean, you don't just write isolated words. And I think, too, that the grammar comes into it a little bit, where you, perhaps it's helpful to take a word like, say, zep, to make, and then you run through, you know, the different zebi, zebin, zebit, zeptit, and so forth like that. But I think that, so the next time that I'm back, that I'd like to, in the time before I come back, I'd like to talk with an education person. I'd like to think about what sort of course design or what sort of structure you need in order to, it's not teaching the writing so much as it is how you train people, how you help people train themselves to write. Eventually, I mean, I think I know what the final product should be. It should be like in English, where, you know, when you write in English, by and large, you don't think about it. You know, it's automatic. You don't even have to watch yourself in writing, except to keep the pencil, you know, keep the writing on the line. It just comes automatically. And when you see a word in English, you recognize it as a whole unity. It's not just, you know, consonants and vowels strung after each other and so forth. So that what I'm saying is there's this is a problem that I'm thinking about and grappling with, because I can see you guys are practically grappling with it. But I don't know, I don't have the educational answer to it. But I do know that it's extremely important, that it's important that a significant number of you become good writers fairly soon in order to carry this work on, you know, the preparation of teaching materials and so forth. 10 years down the track, there should be hundreds of people writing the language. But within the next year or two, we need to try to do something to get a small band or as big a band or a group of people as possible who are writing freely and creatively. I'd also like to say that I've tried here to write on the board to always use the Western Gitksan for a number of reasons, one of which being that we're in Gitksan and to use this spelling that's appropriate to this village. But I don't have as much material in, I haven't done as much work in Western Gitksan as I have in Eastern, so that when I go back through my notes, I have a pretty good idea of what the Western spelling ought to be, but I don't really have it for sure. And that's why it's important in the coming years, to maintain parity. And I recommend, in putting a big dictionary together that you have both. It may be that within the village here or in this school you want to use just Western, or primarily Western, and then, the kids get familiar with the Eastern later, because they will hear it. No, the new alphabet is complete. That's what we've been using here. And the reason why it was called new is that it was new with respect to the older missionary alphabet, which, as I've indicated, doesn't have enough letters or letter combinations, and doesn't recognize, that there are hard sounds and soft sounds, and that there are, the different kinds of front and back K's and G's. But the new alphabet is, in fact, 20 years old now, or just over 20 years, so it's not so new. But I'm glad you asked that, because I would say that the alphabet we've been using here is the one, it's the same as the alphabet that the Niska use, with just one little difference. They write where we write the apostrophe before, as in mit, they write it just above. In the coast language, Tsimsanam, they use the same alphabet. Kathy Hunt uses this alphabet. Jay Powell uses this alphabet. We all do. I mean, it's become like the standard now, and anybody who would want to change it, whether from inside or outside, I would think would need to consult widely with people. Actually, as you know, the reason for my coming here was in connection with the dictionary project. And it would have been possible, I suppose, if I had just come and maybe to get a small committee together and we worked and started in on the dictionary to get words together and so forth. But in retrospect, I'm glad we didn't do that. I think the best use of my time was to come here with you people who are going to be carrying the work on so that we can work together rather than to have a small elite group. There's a whole bunch of reasons for that, but what immediately comes to mind, I mean, first of all, it's important that all of you are involved, but if it had been just seen as a small groups project, it wouldn't get the wide community acceptance. And Neil and Barbara worked very hard going around the villages and talking with people about the need for everybody to be involved here, so that it's not seen as any particular group's work. And yesterday we talked about the need for unity and working together.
Just one question. Do you see the standard groups that you wrote out that we followed up to try and expand and make our language grow? Was that the intent why you wrote it down, like the national standards?
Yes and no. When I talk,
line of where we're going?
yeah. When I talked about, yes, When I talked about national standard languages, it was in the first instance, you know, so you could compare, you can get an idea of how English functions within Canada as one of the two national languages and some of its characteristics, but also to take that as a goal in the sense not that Smalgech will become, you know, a standard language throughout Canada, but within your own homeland, it achieves parity or near parity with English. And I do think that it is necessary to standardize in the sense of all using the same alphabet, even though there's going to be different spellings depending on Eastern or Western. It is important to develop a body of literature, of things to read, ranging from, you know, very serious material to light, entertaining material. It is important to develop, you know, the codified reference works like a dictionary and grammar, so forth. And at this point, well, not simply at this point, but I'd say indefinitely, it's necessary to teach the language as a second language or to teach it as a first language. We're talking about the need to recapture the children, you know, through immersion and so forth, where they're not going to be reading and writing in the first instance. But if they're to develop their Smalgech on a par with English as they move through the grades, you're going to need written materials. It can't be all oral. So in other words, the language does need to be moved, standardized in that sense, to be made like English or French or other languages. But the only people who can do that are youth. There now are a group of educators who say that indigenous languages can't compete successfully with English there because they've been taken into an English domain, and that really they can be strengthened only if they're taken out of the school where they're not in competition with English and where they're put into the home and the local community. On the surface, that sounds like a good argument because we know the home, the family, home, and community are most important for language transmission. But you know who the people who are the strongest supporters of what's called domain separation? Is those redneck politicians who see it as a way of cutting down the costs of training teachers, of preparing materials, so that what on the surface seems to be an educational argument and has its own rationale, when you look at it more deeply, there's a political agenda there. And it's a way simply of putting the language under the rug again, so that my advice to you is don't accept that argument of domain separation, that the more you put the language out in the public, in street signs, in little maybe short word lists or text booklets for the tourists that come through, that they're the argument that, you know, you need to be worried about white people understanding you, or, you know, getting in on your private knowledge, your secrets and so forth, is not really something to worry about a great deal. The Oksiwa who takes the time to learn your language and gets to that point is the sort of person you want to be talking to anyway, that you don't have to worry about, you know, taking something off and away from you. So I wouldn't worry about that.
To see how the poem goes?
Sure.
And the title is called War. That's how it sounds in one language. Yuk likolop lak baltiga. Yuk pendas is lak yuk tum suwati. Yuk pulnet echitum. Lupeni jachti. Yuk likolop lak baltiga. I album of one yuk the dog. The secret of stars. Well, and it was no, but well, and then we talk stars. In this one, I'm about Saturn, someone no one for like slash Saturn, and one said that for a You want to know when we lack when perfect, the say it's still a percent ton. We keep getting the last part mixed up.
Simgiat and Sigidam Nap and Kuba Wilkes. Sim the Dawat Gaudy will Tayukund and Tlamaktis. Saluquant will them Guxlu Yaltwi at Australia. Lord Gaudy will the Ark Squish Willis at Decent. Simayes Bach Key Schlochs. Simwe Tis and Haslals Zabel will dip so relax and dim dip will a tamder Algech and will another Dohot Algech. Help Allah the say and imessum so relax and it Amadil Haas Amadil Haas Eoch die heel lawsome ne will so relax and me. Ne will so relax and sim kalmach body dem kalje dem so relax and an haslaas tun. Skid a market will haslaas system kan ne dem dit kan kwaad sim alget. Machte aber kiat lawe wel sta juk dem kan kwaad sim alget. Nedi nem hoch se kees die as masas lawe. Dem etnamism dem slot god dit het hoog dit lop algech dit nedem die an het zorg dit lord. Nedi an het zorg French people will hoog dit lop algech dit. Niet dem het kees dit ga niet gesnoemd aan hoog. Dem ginnach la maktis til chaai laasem. Hasagai dem hetzma guchslu yaltwi. Hasagai dem hetzma lumasem missem dem willa de edit haslapist. Dem hetzma uusem ni ze hasaksem in dem hetzma lumasem. Hat me ja ni alok gaat niet sneesem, wil het aardigsisem, missem nach niet mashash we lasem. Had me ja nee, als het gaat niet, wil het alles het, als we zo relaxen, kan soon get wengach, kan Gitksan with so it in education society. Is kuskitsum hat niet skats Christ. Kan amma se kurs lasen. Dat amt kaskot hei.